plays written on a tragedy of faith. And here with Donald Erikson, the author of tonight's play, is Raymond Whitehouse.
This evening, we turn to Western Canada for the setting of our play. To be specific, the town of Frank, Alberta. Perhaps many in the radio audience will remember this as the place where one of the worst mountain slides in history occurred. Am I right so far, Don?
That's right. Nearly 100 people died that morning.
And in terms of actual size, I believe the slide was stupendous, wasn't it?
The peak of Turtle Mountain fell on part of the sleeping town. The force of the slide carried the rocks across the valley and a distance up the other side.
In your play, you do not deal with the disaster itself.
I've chosen instead to tell of some of the inhabitants, purely imaginary, of course, up to a point instantly before the disaster.
Where do you find your tragedy of faith in this story?
In the faith that we will all wake up tomorrow morning.
Point Counterpoint brings you The Night Before by Donald Erikson, a tragedy of faith. One April morning, 52 years ago, an entire mountaintop fell on a small Canadian town, decimating its inhabitants. We are concerned tonight with The Night Before.
The town of Frank, Alberta, 1903. It is 5 o'clock of a late April afternoon, and already the sun has passed behind the crags of Turtle Mountain, leaving the town in shadow. The kerosene lamps are lit in the houses. The smell of cooking rises in the blue air. The sound of women calling their children in for supper and of men stomping up to the porches of their homes. The beginning of spring in the Rockies.
Hello, Mr. Blaney. You're back late from the mine?
Oh, hello, Mrs. Paget. Just getting slow, I guess.
It's time you quit that work underground, Mr. Blaney.
Might as well work as sit on my bumper, Mrs. Paget.
Nice this evening.
It sure is. Mind if I sit on your step for a moment?
Sure you wouldn't like to come inside? It's a cold wind blowing down the pass.
Why, we're just lucky we ain't having snow. In 1873, I went through here to the Caribou country, and I remember 2 feet fell in one night, June the 12th. Never forget it.
You've seen a lot of this country, Mr. Blaney.
Well, on and off, Mrs. Paget. It was over in the Caribou I made my fortune, though. And look what it's done for me. Hard work and whiskey.
Oh, it's cold.
I'll be shoving off. How's your husband liking the mine?
He don't like it, Mr. Blaney.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Paget. It takes getting used to. Heck, I'm not used to it yet, and I've sweated all my life. Of course, I wasn't brought up in the coal shafts. There was always a shack in the mountains for me, panning gold out of the creeks. That's the life. Of course, when you're expecting a young family, it's different. Those dollars have got to keep coming in, don't they? Well, so long, Mrs. Paget. Nice to have a break on the long journey home.
Jim Jackson, the rancher, was talking to the new minister in town, Reverend Robert McCoy.
Well, it's going to be great news to my wife to know our church is going up in town. She misses that more than anything else, Reverend.
It's pleasant to think there are people missing it, Mr. Jackson. I'll make a point of coming around and visiting your wife. I'd like to meet her.
Do that, Reverend. She don't forget her scripture. It's kind of hard for her in a town like this.
Hmm?
Well, it could do with some religion.
There isn't a town or a person that couldn't, Mr. Jackson.
Well, that's right, Reverend, that's right. But being full of miners and the like tends to make it rowdy.
Yeah.
Well, the whole town's happened in the last 2 years, you know. I recall it because my youngest, Jimmy, was just a month old, and it was for us then. We came here a year before that. Just got nicely started, mind you. I don't say I'm not glad for it. But you know how it is, Reverend.
Yes, yes.
One day they find old Turtle Mountain has coal in her, and before you know it, there's a railway here and a town, people to fill her up. Some of these miners are hard-drinking men, Reverend.
I would expect so, Mr. Jackson.
Mind you, there's a lot who disagree with me. But, well, we're glad you come. Remember now, the wife will be looking forward to seeing you, Reverend.
I won't forget. And it's nice to meet you, too, Mr. Jackson.
The Reverend Mr. Robert McCoy turned then and went up the street towards his little dwelling, which stood next to where the new church was being built. Before going inside, he stopped and took a deep breath. It was the kind of weather he loved. A keen little wind blew down the valley, and it had in it the smell of spring in the Rockies. In this place, surely, he thought, he could find his life again, perhaps even face the torment and terror of it. His glance fell on the towering form of Turtle Mountain, massed against the stars, mute and huge in the silence of its depths, making an illegible scroll, dimly perceived against the sky. For a moment, he thought he heard it rumbling in its fastnesses. Sarah Holmes, in her cabin further up the slope, thought she heard the mountain, too.
What's that?
Just a slide up the mountain. Look, are you going to answer me or not?
Are you worried how the town's talking, are you?
The town can talk how it pleases. You know it isn't that, Sarah.
Well, then, what is it?
It's McKean. You've been seeing him lately.
I see. Now, look, Terry, you had a bad shift. Just take it easy, will you?
Have you been seeing him, Sarah?
The thought of any other man in my life is just too much for you to bear, isn't it, Terry? Is that why you don't like my party?
You can have all the parties you want. I don't give a hoot.
Oh, yes, you do. Terry, you might as well learn that there have been a lot of men in my life. You aren't the first by a long shot, and you won't be the last either.
To think you was a schoolteacher once. You sure made a mess of your life, Sarah.
It's important to you, is it, Terry?
Running a roadhouse for minors.
What's wrong with that? Are you ashamed of me?
The way you behave, yes. I don't care about your parties, but when you start fooling around...
Look, stop shouting at me. I didn't know you had any proprietary rights in my life, but since you think you do, let me tell you, Terry, that you don't own me. The world doesn't own me. Nobody owns me. I'm older than you are, and perhaps you only need to grow up a little to understand. But whether you ever understand or not, remember what I said. I chose my way of life, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm not asking anybody to approve of it, only to let me be. All right? Now, let's get the place ready for the boys.
Bill Blaney had finished his supper of baked beans and white bread and was doing up the dishes when Jack Keenan, a single miner like himself, stepped over, smoking his pipe.
I heard some rumbling back in the mountains a while ago. I guess the snow will be off the hills before long.
I hope so, Jack. I can't seem to get the cold out of my bones.
It's time you were quitting work, Bill.
All of a sudden, everybody's telling me to quit work.
Well, why not? You must have enough now to take care of yourself. A few more years for me, and I know I'm through.
The only thing is I don't feel like quitting. It's funny. All my life, I looked forward to the years of leisure I'd spend near the end of it. Now it's here, I don't want it.
There are other things for a man of your age to do besides mine coal.
Up here, Jack? What else can you do but split kindling and gossip?
Well, I know what you mean. You know they're talking about taking action to close down Sarah Holmes' place?
I'm kind of sorry for that woman, Jack. She's been chased out of more towns than we've been in. And all because she's single and not afraid to make hay while the sun shines.
If you don't stick to the rules, you get slapped. That's the way it is.
I think life is slapping her all the time. And there's no need to grind the knuckles in.
Well, you may be right. But it's the way things are.
And they're all wrong, too. I'm just old enough to know it. The whole darn setup is wrong. When people get the righteous look in the eyes, look out. There's bound to be trouble. And you know what it comes down to, Jack. People just can't stomach one another.
Well, maybe.
The fact is, they just can't stomach themselves.
Blame old Adam and Eve, Bill. There's the root of it.
The root of it, Jack, is right between your eyes.
The valley was in complete darkness now, and shadows crept over the slopes of the mountains opposite the town, spilled into the sky, and the moon appeared. At the McQueen's household, The oldest of the three children, Harry, was sitting at the base of the old grandfather clock, listlessly watching the arms swing back and forth.
Harry, come away from there. So I said to her, you can keep your opinions to yourself. I'm not very interested in your opinions, Mrs. Bushel, even if they are only reserved for my ears. Why, she's told the whole town. I'd just like to know what she said about us. That kind hasn't got a good word for anybody but themselves. Harry, it's time for your bed. And every other day she's got some new thing to tell me about her daughter. They're all lies, you know. She told me her daughter was going to marry one of the biggest men in Toronto, a chain store owner. Find out they aren't even engaged. And here she thinks I'm a snob. Harry, will you come here?
Dear,
Really, I don't think I can stand it much longer. The people here are awful, awful. So vulgar and mean.
Why, not long ago you were saying how kind and considerate they
Harry,
were.
did you hear me? Come this instant. This instant. Well, you have to live next door to be able to find out what they're really like. Oh, my dear, I don't know how you stand it, running that little store after what you've been.
You've got to make the best of it, that's all, Catherine. Why make it any worse?
I can't help it. I can't help it. You had so much promise, Ralph.
Forget it. That's all over now.
No, it isn't. We've got to face it, Ralph. I know what they're whispering about us. Oh, you can't blind yourself to it, Ralph.
Oh,
They're
Catherine.
saying that you had to leave Toronto.
Please, Catherine.
They're saying you were mixed up in a fraud.
We've gone over all of it before, 100 times. I don't want to hear any more of
Well,
it.
how can you stay here and take it after what we've been? How can you, Ralph? And from people like these.
Catherine, I'm going out. I can't stay here and listen to you.
Oh, you're always walking out on me. You just don't want to talk to me anymore. I know it's unpleasant, but we've got to face it. Oh, all right then, go. Go! Harry, come here at once. You hear? Come at once.
Mr. McKean walked slowly up the street, past the stables, past his own store, past the home of the new minister, the Reverend McCoy, who sat inside, hunched over a single light, reading from St. Luke.
And the devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread. And Jesus answered him, saying, It is written that man shall not live by bread alone.
The lamp fluttered in the darkness, for a wind stirred on the mountainside, but the minister did not notice it. He saw only the shape of Jesus walking alone in a wilderness of rubble and the night around him. While at Sarah Holmes, a party was in progress.
Oh, come on, Buck. Liven her up. That's better.
Another one, Jim, coming right up.
It's a grand world, a lovely grand world, and this is a grand part of it. Not that complicated.
Yeah, that's right, Terry boy. And you're a grand fella, too.
I'm going to make myself a fortune. You know that, Don? I'm going to invest my money in a coal mine and come out rich.
Well, this is the place, and you're the man to do it, boy.
Bet your life. You know what? I'm going to take Sarah out of here. I'm going to set her up to be a grand lady of high society.
Good for you, Terry.
Lord and Lady Terence Gibbs. This will be Knights of the Gutter.
Oh, you're rich already, kid. A few more Boilermakers, and you'll have a share in paradise.
Sarah, come over here.
Now, take it easy, Terry.
Sarah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just yelling Tom. I'm going to set you up to be a grand lady.
I'm a grand lady now, Terry.
A lady of the gutter.
Okay, Terry, okay.
Keep it as quiet as you can, will you, Tom? I don't want the place wrecked.
I heard you, sir. You're going straight up blazes. You're made for it. Let me go, Tom. Let go.
You just sit down, Terry. Right here. I'll pour you another one.
I'm no good. No good. No good.
Mr. McKean stood outside Sarah Holmes, listening to the music and the laughter. It seemed to him that it was from another life he heard those sounds, from somewhere afar off, 25 years ago when he was very young. But the years had pressed him down until there was no joy left in him, and now, not even love. The bitterness of it, the bitterness of his struggle to succeed, and all false, all for nothing. He knew now how little he had ever wanted success, how he hated it. He wondered why it was that it took a man a lifetime to know how to live. He walked up the path to Sarah's place and opened the door and stepped inside. Olive Paget finished the sleeve of the sweater she was knitting for Mike, her husband, and held it up to inspect it. In a few hours, Mike would return. In a way, it was better, she thought, the night shift. She found that she had more time with him. If only her husband liked it here. She did. It was pleasant to her. The people were kind. She liked the long valley, the wild flowers that grew on the mountain slopes in summer, even the sight of Turtle Mountain so close over their heads. She was sure that in time Mike would get used to the work and everything would be fine. Out on the ranch, the Jacksons had gone to bed, but still lay awake, talking.
We're going to break even this year, Debbie. With a little luck, we'll break even.
Oh, Jim, so good.
Yeah, the valley's all right. The times when I wondered about it.
I've come to like it, Jim.
Yeah?
Our youngest born here, and now we're doing so well.
That's a queer thing, Deb. We used to own some of the best ranch country anywhere, and yet we never could make anything out of it. Hardly scrape through. We start here from scratch, and before you know it, we've got a real ranch.
Did the minister say when he was going to call, Jim?
No, but he will, never fear.
It's good having a minister here and a church.
Makes it feel like home, don't it, Dad?
Mm-hmm. There was something my mother always said, Jim. You just can't tear up your roots without hurting something.
Well, she was right, too. Good night, Debbie. We got a big day ahead of us, and we're going to need all the sleep we can get.
Good night, Jim.
The town was going to sleep. Olive Paget had put away her knitting and was dozing by the fire because she did not like to go to bed until her husband returned. The Reverend Mr. McCoy lay in the darkness of his room, the cool mountain air fanning him, making him drowsy in the warmth of his bed, and yet he could not sleep. Bill Blaney, sitting on the side of his bed, pulled off his socks and stared at his swollen feet with his face screwed up in a mixture of disgust and sympathy. Everyone in the town, alone in the private world of their thoughts, expectant, waiting, looking for something. The next drink, the next paycheck, the next crop, the next meal, the next day. Each person in the room of his thoughts, blaming the weather or other people or the world or the stars for what was wrong, or else hopeful, waiting, a little afraid that what they hoped for would not help, and only a few able to enjoy the moment, in a knitted sleeve, the breeze coming down the valley with the smell of melting snow in it, and the sounds of streams on the mountainside, or in music and young laughter. Mr. McKean sat in Sarah's front room, flushed with pleasure, not knowing quite what to do with it, watching it like a small boy would, the extra-large coin he had found in the gutter, and which was now in the palm of his hand.
Tom, over here a moment.
Yes, Sarah?
Look, there's going to be trouble if we're not careful. Terry has the notes, and I've been playing around with our friend McKean there. You'll have to watch Terry. I'm going over to McKean and talk to him.
I wouldn't do that, Sarah. You're just asking for trouble.
Maybe I am, but I told Terry today he's not going to tell me who to see or what to do. This is a good time to make it clear to him.
Well, all right, Sarah. Suit yourself.
Don't worry, Tom. I think I know Terry pretty well, and I don't think he's going to do a thing. Hello, Mr. McKean.
Hello.
Welcome to Sarah Holmes' establishment. Is there anything I can bring you in the way of refreshment?
Just a scotch and water, Sarah. Make it thick, will you?
Coming right up. Here we are, Mr. McKean.
I think it will help, Sarah.
Should. Mind if I join you?
I'd be honored.
A long time since we've had a gentleman like you in our midst.
Here's to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Let me correct you, Sarah. I was a gentleman once. It never suited me very well. In fact, Sarah, trying to be a gentleman, a successful gentleman, is one of the unhappiest jobs in the world.
You're still a gentleman. I recognize it, Mr. McKean. Sticks out a mile because it's so rare. It doesn't have anything to do with the clothes you wear or even your manners. Let's say it's the manner of your manners. Are they real or are they worn like a fashionable suit?
Well, let's say then, Sarah, that I'm a broken down and worn out gentleman who wants to forget what he should be and learn the taste of things all over again. You know what I mean?
I believe I do, Mr. McKean.
Yes, you would. You don't waste time thinking about what should be, do you? Only about what is. Am I right?
Sometimes sad, Mr. McKean, to have to think that way.
We understand one another, don't we, Sarah? We don't have to say a thing.
Maybe we're the same kind of people, Mr. McKean. If we are, I'm sorry for you. You must have had a devil of a life.
I have.
Well, then, here's to you, Mr. McKean. Drink deep and enjoy yourself. You must need it after all these years. I'll bring you another glass. See, Terry's under control, Tom.
Funniest thing I ever saw. He watched you talking to McKean there, and I thought for sure someone was gonna die. Then he reached for his glass, gulped it off, and he went out like a light.
Good for him. He's got some sense after all. Thanks, Tom.
No trouble at all, Sarah.
Hey, Buck, a little more music. The evening's fresh, and we're just beginning to enjoy ourselves.
Coming right up, Sarah.
Mr. McKean, let's celebrate.
Behind Turtle Mountain as the night wore on. Jack Keenan swore in his sleep, and Bill Blaney, with a bottle of hot water at his feet, remembered his childhood on an Ontario farm.
Are the Fenians gone, Father? Don't let them come. They're not coming, are they? The Fenians won't catch me, will they, Father?
Oh, no. You go to sleep now. Everything's fine.
What are the Fenians, Father?
Then the hot water bottle fell away from his feet, and Bill Blaney had to grope for it, cursing. And when he got it back in place, he dreamed that the schoolteacher was caning him again. And when he was finished, he stood him up and said,
William, I'm afraid you'll never come to much good. William, I'm afraid you... asleep by the fire which was down to 2 gleaming coals, saw herself in her shimmering bridal gown, moving up the aisle between the rows of people, all of them smiling upon her, and the young man who was waiting for her at the altar, turning to give her a furtive, happy glance before she joined him, and they stood forever in the glowing candlelight, hand in hand. But the Reverend Mr. McCoy could not sleep. His bed was small and hard, and he found himself getting peevish with it, and with the night that lay heavily upon him so that it was hard to breathe. And he sat up with surprise, his hands searching for the window beside him. He could find it nowhere, and he jumped to his feet, expecting the floor to give way beneath him. There was a table on the other side of the room, and he crept to it on his hands and knees, until he had bumped into it and groped for the lamp and the matches beside it. When he'd lit the lamp, he sat on a chair with his head in his hands. It was all right. It was all right. The night had turned black. That was all. He said over and over to himself as he prayed to the dark. There was no sound anywhere in the night. although a captain was. And Jim Jackson turned in his sleep and dreamt that he was riding high with the boys for a wild time in his old Saskatchewan town.
Uncork that bottle again, Reg, and pass her over.
Jim, do you think Sue will be waiting for you tonight, Jim?
Darn right she is.
You aiming to marry her?
Matter of fact, I am. There's a gal worth any dozen of the others.
Well, if that's the case, you better brace yourself up a bit, Jim. Here's the bottle. Help yourself.
No, I don't want it.
I believe that man's in love with Susan Sarah Clara Joe.
Are you going to ask her tonight, Jim?
You better take a drink to set yourself, Jim, for asking her.
What if she says no, Jim?
Let her have just one little drink, Jim.
No girl wants to say yes to a sour face, Jim.
All right, just one then. Only because I'm tired to death of listening to it.
Have another one, Jim. That's a boy.
Mrs. McKean, in another room in another part of the town, dreamt that she and her husband were dancing in a great palace room, and all the eyes of the multitude were on her swirling beauty, and her husband would not let her dance with any other man. The mountain in the early morning looked coldly down on the little town hugged into its side, the town that it would soon smother in one huge, convulsive, annihilating embrace. Coils of mist had spread along its peaks and sprung in plumes high into the pre-dawn sky. It was still dark when McKean moved slowly down the road to his own home, and all the town slept. Indeed, it seemed to him that all the world was in a deep unconsciousness, and that he was the only wakeful member left. He and the mountain which loomed above him in spires that pointed through holes in the mist to the flecks of stars. There is that in the pre-dawn which has the taste of pre-existence, a rawness in the earth and in the air that has no shape or life. No wind exists, no sound, but only far and away the moving darkness like the shadow of some giant's mind in sleep. McKean felt it, ancient in his bones, and would have fled the rising terror, but he could not. Instead, he opened the door to his home and stood inside and waited, as all the sleepers of the town were waiting for the dawn.
The Night Before by Donald Erikson, the first of two tragedies of faith in the series Point Counterpoint. In order of their appearance as Olive Paget, Louise DeVick, Bill Blaney, Sam Payne, Jim Jackson, Walter Marsh, the Reverend McCoy, Robert Clothier, Sarah, Dorothy Fowler, Terrence, Doug Haskins, Jack Keenan, Eric Vale, Catherine McKean, Ray Brown, Ralph McKean, John Emerson, Bill, Derek Ralston, Tom, Doug Campbell, Deborah, Lillian Carlson, a father, Alan Caillou, and Billy, Shannon Fowler. Narration was by Lee Taylor. Point Counterpoint is a CBC Vancouver radio production and is directed by Raymond Whitehouse, with music composed and conducted by Richmond Hislop. Sound sequence, Ted Levesque and Frank Vivian. Control operation, Ken Buer. This is Don McKibben. Next Friday night at this time, the second of our two tragedies of faith on Point Counterpoint, The Trial of Nicholas Van Doren by Ian Thorne. Mr. Thorne takes from history the biography of a great artist who was tried by the Inquisition on grounds of obscenity in his work. The tragedy is that although Nicholas Van Doren was cleared of the charges, he was never again accepted by society, and so his great career came to an end only at its beginning. Join us next Friday, then, for Point Counterpoint, the drama series with two authors alternating on the same theme. And until then, good night. This is the CBC.